Hi everyone, welcome to our lunch and learn today. Dee is going to take you through the Intacct end of financial year and TPAR information. So I'll hand over to you, Dee.
Thanks, Lauren. We'll kick off the presentation now. So hi everyone, my name's Dee. I'm a consultant at Thrive Technologies and I'll be presenting to you today. In this presentation, I will talk about closing the books in Sage Intacct and the Taxable Payments Annual Report, also known as TPAR. Once this presentation concludes, I'll open up for any questions. Okay, closing the books at the end of financial year. The first step is to close the relevant subledgers, and these subledgers include accounts payable, accounts receivable, time and expenses, and cash management. Before doing this, please ensure that all accounts are reconciled and that suspense items are cleared. To close the books, you'll need to have the right permissions. These permissions are separate for each application. To check permissions, please follow the menu path on the screen and assign the relevant permissions based on your requirements. Okay, into closing subledgers. I've included in this slide the Sage Intacct menu path to follow in order to close subledgers. This example shows the AP subledger. However, as previously mentioned, you can close subledgers for accounts receivable, cash management, and time and expenses subledgers also. The fields that you'll need to update for the other subledgers are similar to this example. To close a subledger in an application, follow the menu path to access the relevant application. Select the relevant entity or entity group from the drop-down that you wish to close. Specify the end date for the time period that you want to close. As an example, month ended June 2024. All periods between the two dates selected will be closed. And then to end, select the close button to officially close the subledger. Okay, on to closing the general ledger. In this slide, once again, I've included the menu path to follow in order to close the GL. Just as before, select the entity to close the GL for a specific entity. Specify the end date for the time period that you want to close. Again, as an example, month ended June 2024. And then select Close Books to officially close the general ledger. And that is how you close the books. Next, we'll talk about TPAR. So, Taxable Payments Annual Report, also known as TPAR. If your Australian company or entity is required to report payments made to contractors and subcontractors, being your suppliers, in an annual TPAR report, you can generate your report in Sage Intacct. You can then use the information from this report to lodge your TPAR with the Australian Taxation Office. A TPAR report must be lodged with the ATO by the 28th of August. What is included in TPAR? TPAR is an ATO reporting obligation, so specific information will be disclosed on the TPAR report to identify the payer, being yourself, and the supplier, and this information includes things such as ABN, contact information, in addition to amounts paid to the supplier, GST, and tax withheld, if applicable. And I'll just reiterate again that this report and the information that is required within it is an ATO obligation. So the ATO set the rules on this one. Before I show you how to configure TPAR for your entity, I'll highlight the workflow. So firstly, before you can run your first TPAR in Intacct, you'll need to configure Sage Intacct for TPAR reporting. And this includes enabling TPAR for the company or relevant entities, assigning user permissions to run the report, and enabling TPAR for relevant suppliers. Once you have enabled TPAR for a supplier, a TPAR tab is added to the supplier information record. Use this tab to record any withholding taxes or relevant statements that are received. And lastly, once the configuration is complete and the supplier information is entered, you can run the TPAR report after financial year end. And now I'll take you through the steps to configure TPAR. So step 1, enable the company or entity for TPAR. If you are enabling TPAR for your entire company, do this at the top level. Otherwise, you can enable TPAR at the entity level. A point to note is that if you do create your suppliers at the top level, then please enable TPAR at the top level, because this will allow you to enable your top level suppliers also. Once you have selected the Enable TPAR Report checkbox, please ensure that you save your changes. Step 2, provide entity-specific legal contact information. I've included in this slide again the menu path for the process. Once you enable TPAR in the entity by checking the box, please enter all the relevant details such as legal name and contact details. And as always, please ensure that you save all your changes. Step 3, assign the run permissions for the TPAR report. You need to decide within your organisation who will have permission to run the TPAR report and then assign that permission to the relevant user. Depending on the permissions model within your company, you'll either need to edit the user subscription or assign a role to a user. Step 4 is to configure all suppliers that need to be included in the TPAR report. I've included the menu path for this process in this slide. Once you select the checkbox to enable TPAR, please enter the supplier's TPAR name and check that their ABN is present in their supplier record. Sage Intacct has the ability to validate supplier ABNs. It's best practice to enable this functionality to ensure the accuracy of ABN information. Supplier TPAR information record, and now we get into the actual reporting of TPAR. So once you have configured TPAR for your suppliers, a TPAR tab will appear in the supplier record. This tab needs to be considered for all your TPAR suppliers prior to running the TPAR report. And to do this, firstly consider whether tax has been withheld from a payment to a supplier. When a contractor or subcontractor does not provide an ABN, you typically withhold a portion of their payment under the PAYG withholding rules. This withholding needs to be reported in this tab unless you are reporting the withholding on your PAYG payment summary. And to report it in this tab, as you can see on row 1, select the location where the payment to the supplier was made, select the financial year when the payment was made, select total tax withheld option from the drop box and enter the amount withheld as a value. If you'd like to record a null value, then simply enter 0.00. Just a side note, if you don't enter a value for this, the default reporting in the TPAR report is 0. Next, report whether you have received a statement by the supplier. A supplier provides you with a statement to confirm that the supplier is not required or eligible to register for an ABN and that their business meets the ATO's criteria whereby tax withholding is not required. If you receive this statement from a supplier, you'll need to record it in this tab. And as you can see on row 2, to do this is the same process as entering the withholding tax, but instead select the statement by supplier drop-down option. And if you receive a statement from the supplier, then select yes. And similar to before, if you don't enter a value for this, the default reporting will be no in the TPAR report. Now, how to run the TPAR report. So Sage Intacct allows a manual report to be extracted and also for a version that can be submitted online to the ATO. So firstly, we'll discuss the manual report. So run this report when you're preparing to lodge your TPAR with the ATO and use the information in this report to file your paper form or to give the report to your tax professional. Before generating the TPAR, make sure that the supplier record for all TPAR-enabled suppliers has been updated. And this includes the supplier ABN or a default value if the supplier didn't provide one, TPAR name in the additional information tab, any withholding taxes, and ensure you record whether or not you received a statement by a supplier. TPAR reporting will need to be run for the full tax financial year. The report will only include a supplier when TPAR is enabled in their supplier information record and you made payments to the supplier during the selected date range. If you're running the report at the entity level, your selection for entity is limited to the current entity. Once you have entered all the filters relevant to your needs, select View on the top right corner of the screen to run the report. And this image in this slide is what the report looks like in Sage Intacct when you view it. To export the report, select Export and choose Excel or CSV format from the drop-down list. This option provides you with all the details in a report so that you can view and review the data before submitting it to the ATO. The next step, if you're ready to lodge your report, the data exported from the report can be used to lodge a paper form with the ATO or be provided to your tax professional. If, however, you want to submit this report to the ATO automatically, you will need to export this report in a text format. And I'll talk through the process of how to do this in the next slide. So exciting times. Sage Intacct has a new release update as part of release 3, which was scheduled for release just a couple of days ago on the 9th of August. And this release allows users to export the TPAR file in text format, which is pre-formatted to meet the ATO requirements and can be lodged by uploading the file to the ATO. I've included the menu path to export this report in this slide to make it easier for everybody viewing. The process is the same as previously discussed with the manual process, but instead, when exporting the file, please select text as the format. And this image on this slide is what the text file report looks like in Sage Intacct when you view it. As mentioned earlier, if you want to review the data, it's best to do that in the Excel view previously discussed, as that's much easier to work with. This file, being a file for submission to the ATO, will generate as an error report if the file doesn't meet the ATO requirements. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like. So you can see in this example, the file is titled error report. Some examples of what could cause the report to error include where either a TPAR-enabled entity or supplier have missing data. So in this example, you can see that there are missing contact fields for the entity and a missing state field for a particular supplier. Correcting these errors in the supplier and entity records and rerunning the report will clear the issues ready for submission to the ATO. And yeah, that concludes this presentation. So I'll open up if anybody has any questions.
Amazing. Thanks, Dee. Does anyone online have any questions?
Hi, Dee. Thank you for that informative information. Can we upload the TPAR report directly into the ATO portal within Sage Intacct?
That's a good question. I would think that I'd have to take that one on notice. I would assume that customers would have a direct link to the ATO portal through their business records, and that there'd be a mechanism to do that directly. But I can get that confirmed and get back to you.
Thank you.
I'll throw out a question that I have been asked in the past just to assist listeners as well. I've been asked in the past by somebody who had hundreds of suppliers whether they needed to enter a supplier, needed to manually enter every supplier record to update the TPAR tab to report that they have not withheld any tax and that they have not withheld a supplier record. Received a supplier record, sorry, a supplier statement. And the answer to that is no. So these records will automatically default to no. And the information from the ATO is that withholding tax and receiving a supplier statement isn't something that happens often. It's more of an exception, and it wouldn't be expected to impact many suppliers.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Dee. Does anybody else have any other questions? Nope, sounds pretty quiet.
With no further questions, yeah, thank you all for your time today.
Thanks, Dee. Thanks, everybody.